Hey, welcome back. This is the last week. I'm going to just do a wrap up today in combination with the last chapter that I'm covering from Think and Grow Rich. The last chapter is called The Sixth Sense. And I feel like this is the very last piece of this elaborate plan that we have been developing over the past 11 weeks. So let's get started. So in this chapter, a unique thing sort of happens. So Napoleon Hill shares something that he has basically withheld from anyone else until this point because of just kind of the weirdness of it. And I think that you will agree. It was very weird. But he basically shares how, our sixth sense is basically like getting hunches from the universe. But I think it really starts to tap into your psychic abilities. And that's something that probably in 1939, when this was written, wasn't, very widely talked about. And it's not really very widely talked about today, even with Instagram and all the people online. But I feel like when you go to somebody who has intuitive abilities, like if you check their Instagram profile, they have thousands and thousands of followers. So people are clearly interested in this aspect of our abilities. Like the sixth sense is beyond our five senses, and our 3D world is maybe what we have thought we lived in, but now you hear people talking about fourth and fifth and more dimensions of the world. So all this kind of ties together in this chapter. All these things that are going on in the world tie into this chapter. Now, Napoleon Hill talks about our sixth sense as the portion of our subconscious mind that's referred to as creative imagination. But he adds kind of an experience that he hasn't talked about yet. So Napoleon Hill has talked about creative imagination before, but he hasn't talked about using his sixth sense to basically reshape his personality by connecting to other people. So I'm going to read you, and actually, I think I've said this before, YouTube has a lot of, probably all of this book on there, and you can listen to this chapter. You can listen to the entire book, but you can listen to this chapter because it's really interesting when he talks about his invisible counselors. So he basically said, in terms of we talked about mastermind, but he has an invisible mastermind that is made up of Henry Ford and Edison and I think Einstein and Lincoln and all these people, most of them who were dead at the time, where he has an imaginary council. Let me find where it says. So he's basically building his character through auto-suggestion. He's thinking of all the people that he wants to be like, where he says Napoleon, I desire to acquire from you by emulation the marvelous ability you possess to inspire men and to arouse them to greater and more determined spirits of action. So he's basically saying, Lincoln, I want to learn this from you, and not just learn it, but he says by emulation. And what are the other words he uses? Exemplifying. He wants to acquire these things from this imaginary council that he has. And so every night he envisions a board, basically a boardroom table with Mr. Carnegie, Mr. Ford, Mr. Darwin, Mr. Payne, Napoleon, Mr. Edison, Mr. Ford, all these people who he aspires to be like. He imagines them sitting around a table with him, and he, in his mind, addresses them. Mr. Ford, I would like to learn this from you. And he said that it got to be so real that, like, Lincoln, he said Lincoln developed a habit of always being late and being the last one to leave. I mean, just weird things that are actually going on. Like, it feels like they're real. And I want to read this part. It talks about Edison. And he says, one night, Edison arrived ahead of all the others. He walked over and seated himself at my left, where Emerson was accustomed to sit, and said, "You are destined to witness the discovery of the secret of life. When the time comes, you will observe that life consists of great swarms of energy or entities, each as intelligent as human beings think themselves to be. These units of life group together like hives of bees and remain together until they disintegrate through lack of harmony. These units have differences of opinion, the same as human beings, and often fight among themselves. They will bring to your rescue some of the very units of life which served the members of your cabinet," which is his, like, invisible counselors, "during their lives. These units are eternal, they never die. Your own thoughts and desires serve as a magnet which attracts units of life from the great ocean out there. Only the friendly units are attracted, the ones which harmonize with the nature of your desires." Then he says that Edison was actually still alive when this event happened to him. So he arranged a meeting with Edison, and he told him about the experience. He said, Edison smiled broadly. He said, "Your dream was more a reality than you may imagine it to have been." Which I think, like, I get chills when I think about that. But, you know, his basic, like, reason for doing this invisible counselors was so that he could impress his subconscious through auto-suggestion of, like, saying, "Hey, Edison, like, let me gain this knowledge from you," and that kind of thing. But what ended up happening is, like, he literally was channeling them, I think, on this deeper level. So very, very interesting aspect of this. And he says at the end, one of the great blessings of maturity is, he says, it sometimes brings one greater courage to be truthful. So he basically is saying, like, now that he has matured more, he is opening up about this and having the confidence to share it. So I think that is pretty cool, because it's just it's something so different than I would have even imagined to end this book. And actually, speaking of the end, you know, we talk about all of these principles, the principles of decision and the power of the mastermind and the mystery of sex transmutation and the subconscious mind and all of this. But the very last chapter in the book talks about outwitting the ghosts of fear. And so that's actually what I'm going to put in the printout for this week and as the conclusion for the whole online class, because what really tends to stop us from acting is, like, our fear. And so the one aspect of fear that I want to talk about is what Napoleon Hill says indecision is. So indecision crystallizes into doubt, and that blends, the two blend and become fear. And I feel like one of the things that I've heard from people taking this class is that they didn't decide in week 2 what they were going to write down. And so if you don't quite know, then that's how it then breeds the doubt, and then that breeds the fear. So getting that locked in, even if it's something for this month, something to apply all of these techniques in this book too. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have one final PDF that has all the video links, and so that way you can have them all in one place, and I'll keep them active for a couple weeks so that you can catch up and really, take notes and refocus on what your desire is, and hopefully you can accomplish that. And I just really appreciate you being here. I hope that even though it was kind of long, I'm going to reformat it and offer it again in the fall, I believe. So I would, just appreciate if you follow me on Instagram or on Facebook. Just say hi every once in a while. And if you have any feedback or like a testimonial that I could share from this class when I relaunch it, please email that to me at amykunkledesign@gmail.com. So thank you again. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.